Education is the nation's determinant factor of future potential and capability. The goal of education is to properly prepare younger generations to succeed in a world run by cultural differences, psychological variances, and resource insecurity and their ever evolving relationships to each other to create independence and harmony. It can be summarized as a focus on fluid intelligence or crystallized. The West has emphasized crystallized facts and ideas, while the East has prioritized fluid interactions and perspectives. Although there are established benefits of creating systems and frameworks to operate out of to find meaning and distinguish truth from fantasy, the harmonization and navigation of multiple frameworks interacting with each other is vital. We see in nature that creation is in a constant state of change, whether external or internal, visible or invisible, but operates by general laws nonetheless. We know that variables can change the entire results of an equation, which itself is a framework. It would seem wise then to focus education around core ideas and principles while instilling the ability to be adaptable and dynamic in social interactions and thought processes to create dynamic solutions for optimal results. I don't think it's worth the argument to condemn Western education at this point because I believe it is already well understood that our system, despite our progress, requires change. I will rather make assertions that I believe will be agreed upon by all, with examination and analysis, about those changes that should be made. I think the first logical question is whether the government should have a say in the education structure. I will argue yes, but within limitations. The issue we currently face with the idea is that the current regulation has become so overbearing that it shifted from establishing a framework of what our kids should know to what they should believe. The system has demanded so much inclusion and support for degeneracy and insanity that they have, in a sense, violated the trust of parents because of the lack of transparency and public input to determine how their child is educated. Instead, they are forced to spend thousands on private education, risk the corruption of public schools, or the burden of homeschooling. Parents simply no longer know what their children are learning or being exposed to, and their freedom to know and choose is being restricted. The issue becomes what is the goal of education to begin with, and what is government's role in determining how that is accomplished. As argued earlier, if only one party is deciding the terms of that agreement, as soon as distrust with perceived violation enters, the relationship begins to deteriorate. The issue we face now is that our framework is inclusion in automated behavior. Yet if enough people drank blood and killed babies, should everyone be forced to know and follow? That may be a crude example, but the point is that if you allow inclusion for some, it opens Pandora's box for all. A similar framework of restriction is then necessary for educational guidelines to determine appropriate limitations and exposure to ideas, but not an enforcement of beliefs and behaviors. As we are arguing throughout this letter, the agreed principles we will determine as a whole supersede any individual regulation or action, and all within the agreement abide by it already. The first assertion I would make then is that government is responsible for determining the education structure that is most optimal and beneficial in terms of maintaining its conformity to the agreed principles we determined for all individuals to achieve the same purpose of progress, with the intention of limiting destructive and poisonous ideas to children in their most influential stages of development. A common complaint of education now is how impractical it's gotten. There are two reasons for this. The first, I believe, is a result of the Rockefeller education system being adopted, which is focused around establishing predictable behaviors and limiting potential in the hopes of creating a strong but mindless workforce. The second contributing factor is a result of our debt and greed. The first two years of university are essentially a recap of high school. Parents and students then are required to use a large portion of their savings or scholarships for classes that produce minimal benefits and prolong their length of study. As a result of this explosion of classes and forcing students to follow a heavily controlled and influenced course curriculum, we've sunk our youth in debt, left them with relatively minimal real-world skills, and have created biological robots for the sole purpose of corporate servitude. The solution to fixing this aspect of education is not clear and defined. The Rockefeller system, although corrupt, it's practical. It allows for general education towards a purpose with specific goals and lays out a clear timeline of progression. The issue is the stated purpose of automation and subordination. The stated purpose should be to develop minds that can think and hands that can work. We've nailed the latter, but are insufficient in independent thought. Independent thought requires an individual to be dynamic in their thinking, have the ability to extract accurate information from external stimuli, and synchronize contrasting ideas and beliefs to form a unifying solution, despite contrasting information. Not only does this create social harmony, domestic and foreign, it creates independence and self-sufficiency. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link, and a nation is only as strong as its weakest citizen. The goal then should be to develop a framework to create strong minds that can stand alone as individuals, naturally making our nation stronger as a whole, despite the corporate risk to power structure. The following are the 7 pillars of education I believe would be most optimal to build around. 7 core subjects: math, science, language and writing, history, philosophy, and religion. Number 2, financial and economic literacy, then social intelligence and harmony, legal literacy and defense, cognitive and emotional advancement, mental and physical health, and finally, independence and sustainability.